the new God of the perfect, the new gods of the perfect, a new God of the perfect, the new goddess of the perfect, the new goddesses of the perfect, a new goddess of the perfect, the old God of the perfect, the old gods of the perfect, a old God of the perfect, the old goddess of the perfect, the old goddesses of the perfect, a old goddess of the perfect, the greater God of the perfect, the greater gods of the perfect, a greater God of the perfect, the greater goddess of the perfect, the greater goddesses of the perfect, a greater goddess of the perfect, the lesser God of the perfect, the lesser gods of the perfect, a lesser God of the perfect, the lesser goddess of the perfect, the lesser goddesses of the perfect, a lesser goddess of the perfect, the greater spirit of the perfect, the greater spirits of the perfect, a greater spirit of the perfect, the lesser spirit of the perfect, the lesser spirits of the perfect, a lesser spirit of the perfect, the major God of the perfect, the major gods of the perfect, a major God of the perfect, the major goddess of the perfect, the major goddesses of the perfect, a major goddess of the perfect, the minor God of the perfect, the minor gods of the perfect, a minor God of the perfect, the minor goddess of the perfect, the minor goddesses of the perfect, a minor goddess of the perfect, the superior God of the perfect, the superior gods of the perfect, a superior God of the perfect, the superior goddess of the perfect, the superior goddesses of the perfect, a superior goddess of the perfect, the inferior God of the perfect, the inferior gods of the perfect, a inferior God of the perfect, the inferior goddess of the perfect, the inferior goddesses of the perfect, a inferior goddess of the perfect, the ancestor God of the perfect, the ancestor gods of the perfect, a ancestor God of the perfect, the ancestor goddess of the perfect, the ancestor goddesses of the perfect, a ancestor goddess of the perfect, the ascendant God of the perfect, the ascendant gods of the perfect, a ascendant God of the perfect, the ascendant goddess of the perfect, the ascendant goddesses of the perfect, a ascendant goddess of the perfect, the descendant God of the perfect, the descendant gods of the perfect, a descendant God of the perfect, the descendant goddess of the perfect, the descendant goddesses of the perfect, a descendant goddess of the perfect, the transcendent God of the perfect, the transcendent gods of the perfect, a transcendent God of the perfect, the transcendent goddess of the perfect, the transcendent goddesses of the perfect, a transcendent goddess of the perfect, the future God of the perfect, the future gods of the perfect, a future God of the perfect, the future goddess of the perfect, the future goddesses of the perfect, a future goddess of the perfect, the present God of the perfect, the present gods of the perfect, a present God of the perfect, the present goddess of the perfect, the present goddesses of the perfect, a present goddess of the perfect, the past God of the perfect, the past gods of the perfect, a past God of the perfect, the past goddess of the perfect, the past goddesses of the perfect, a past goddess of the perfect, the God of the perfect, the gods of the perfect, a God of the perfect, the goddess of the perfect, the goddesses of the perfect, a goddess of the perfect, the God of the perfect sky, the gods of the perfect sky, a God of the perfect sky, the goddess of the perfect sky, the goddesses of the perfect sky, a goddess of the perfect sky, the God of the perfect land, the gods of the perfect land, a God of the perfect land, the goddess of the perfect land, the goddesses of the perfect land, a goddess of the perfect land, the God of the perfect sea, the gods of the perfect sea, a God of the perfect sea, the goddess of the perfect sea, the goddesses of the perfect sea, a goddess of the perfect sea, the half God of the perfect, the half gods of the perfect, a half God of the perfect, the half goddess of the perfect, the half goddesses of the perfect, a half goddess of the perfect, the vessel of the perfect, the vessels of the perfect, a vessel of the perfect, the person of the perfect, the persons of the perfect, a person of the perfect, the persona of the perfect, the personas of the perfect, a persona of the perfect, the personage of the perfect, the personages of the perfect, a personage of the perfect, the personality of the perfect, the personalities of the perfect, a personality of the perfect, the personification of the perfect, the personifications of the perfect, a personification of the perfect, the image of the perfect, the images of the perfect, a image of the perfect, the imagination of the perfect, the imaginations of the perfect, a imagination of the perfect, the belief of the perfect, the beliefs of the perfect, a belief of the perfect, the thought of the perfect, the thoughts of the perfect, a thought of the perfect, the word of the perfect, the words of the perfect, a word of the perfect, the action of the perfect, the actions of the perfect, a action of the perfect, the reaction of the perfect, the reactions of the perfect, a reaction of the perfect, the situation of the perfect, the situations of the perfect, a situation of the perfect, the circumstance of the perfect, the circumstances of the perfect, a circumstance of the perfect, the relationship of the perfect, the relationships of the perfect, a relationship of the perfect, the number of the perfect, the numbers of the perfect, a number of the perfect, the formula of the perfect, the formulas of the perfect, a formula of the perfect, the equation of the perfect, the equations of the perfect, a equation of the perfect, the symbol of the perfect, the symbols of the perfect, a symbol of the perfect, the color of the perfect, the colors of the perfect, a color of the perfect, the thing of the perfect, the things of the perfect, a thing of the perfect, the way of the perfect, the ways of the perfect, a way of the perfect, the place of the perfect, the places of the perfect, a place of the perfect, the time of the perfect, the times of the perfect, a time of the perfect, the event of the perfect, the events of the perfect, a event of the perfect, the result of the perfect, the results of the perfect, a result of the perfect, the crown of the perfect, the crowns of the perfect, a crown of the perfect, the perfect king, the perfect kings, the perfect kingdom, the perfect kingdoms, the perfect king's subject, the perfect king's subjects, the perfect king's dominion, the perfect king's dominions, the kingdom of the perfect, the kingdoms of the perfect, a kingdom of the perfect queen, the perfect queens, the perfect queendom, the perfect queendoms, the perfect queen's subject, the perfect queen's subjects, the perfect queen's dominion, the perfect queen's dominions, the queendom of the perfect, the queendoms of the perfect, a queendom of the perfect prince, the perfect princes, the perfect princedom, the perfect princedoms, the perfect prince's subject, the perfect prince's subjects, the perfect prince's dominion, the perfect prince's dominions, the princedom of the perfect, the princedoms of the perfect, a princedom of the perfect princess, the perfect princesses, the perfect princessdom, the perfect princessdoms, the perfect princess's subject, the perfect princess's subjects, the perfect princess's dominion, the perfect princess's dominions, the princessdom of the perfect, the princessdoms of the perfect, a princessdom of the perfect, the leader of the perfect, the leaders of the perfect, a leader of the perfect, the follower of the perfect, the followers of the perfect, a follower of the perfect, the natural form of the perfect, the natural forms of the perfect, a natural form of the perfect, the supernatural form of the perfect, the supernatural forms of the perfect, a supernatural form of the perfect, the temporal form of the perfect, the temporal forms of the perfect, a temporal form of the perfect, the spiritual form of the perfect, the spiritual forms of the perfect, a spiritual form of the perfect, the age of the perfect, the ages of the perfect, a age of the perfect, the awakening of the perfect, the awakenings of the perfect, a awakening of the perfect, the realm of the perfect, the realms of the perfect, a realm of the perfect, the dimension of the perfect, the dimensions of the perfect, a dimension of the perfect, the purpose of the perfect, the purposes of the perfect, a purpose of the perfect, the meaning of the perfect, the meanings of the perfect, a meaning of the perfect, the culture of the perfect, the cultures of the perfect, a culture of the perfect, the manifestation of the perfect, the manifestations of the perfect, a manifestation of the perfect, the presence of the perfect, the presences of the perfect, a presence of the perfect, the source of the perfect, the sources of the perfect, a source of the perfect, the origin of the perfect, the origins of the perfect, a origin of the perfect, the ancestor of the perfect, the ancestors of the perfect, a ancestor of the perfect, the descendant of the perfect, the descendants of the perfect, a descendant of the perfect, the lineage of the perfect, the lineages of the perfect, a lineage of the perfect, the forefather of the perfect, the forefathers of the perfect, a forefather of the perfect, the foremother of the perfect, the foremothers of the perfect, a foremother of the perfect, the mask of the perfect, the masks of the perfect, a mask of the perfect, the armor of the perfect, the armors of the perfect, a armor of the perfect, the sword of the perfect, the swords of the perfect, a sword of the perfect, the shield of the perfect, the shields of the perfect, a shield of the perfect, the champion of the perfect, the champions of the perfect, a champion of the perfect, the elemental art of the perfect, the elemental arts of the perfect, a elemental art of the perfect, the elemental science of the perfect, the elemental sciences of the perfect, a elemental science of the perfect, the elemental principle of the perfect, the elemental principles of the perfect, a elemental principle of the perfect, the agent of the perfect, the agents of the perfect, a agent of the perfect, the agency of the perfect, the agencies of the perfect, a agency of the perfect, the amplifier of the perfect, the amplifiers of the perfect, a amplifier of the perfect, the amplification of the perfect, the amplifications of the perfect, a amplification of the perfect, the aura of the perfect, the auras of the perfect, a aura of the perfect, the power of the perfect, the powers of the perfect, a power of the perfect, the authority of the perfect, the authorities of the perfect, a authority of the perfect, the might of the perfect, the mights of the perfect, a might of the perfect, the dominion of the perfect, the dominions of the perfect, a dominion of the perfect, the melody of the perfect, the melodies of the perfect, a melody of the perfect, the rhythm of the perfect, the rhythms of the perfect, a rhythm of the perfect, the dance of the perfect, the dances of the perfect, a dance of the perfect, the music of the perfect, the musics of the perfect, a music of the perfect, the lyric of the perfect, the lyrics of the perfect, a lyric of the perfect, the song of the perfect, the songs of the perfect, a song of the perfect, the spirit of the perfect, the spirits of the perfect, a spirit of the perfect, the people of the perfect, the peoples of the perfect, a people of the perfect, the mark of the perfect, the marks of the perfect, a mark of the perfect, the promise of the perfect, the promises of the perfect, a promise of the perfect, the vision of the perfect, the visions of the perfect, a vision of the perfect, the language of the perfect, the languages of the perfect, a language of the perfect, the sound of the perfect, the sounds of the perfect, a sound of the perfect, the secret of the perfect, the secrets of the perfect, a secret of the perfect, the intelligence of the perfect, the intelligences of the perfect, a intelligence of the perfect, the sophistication of the perfect, the sophistications of the perfect, a sophistication of the perfect, the genius of the perfect, the geniuses of the perfect, a genius of the perfect, the polymath of the perfect, the polymaths of the perfect, a polymath of the perfect, the psychic of the perfect, the psychics of the perfect, a psychic of the perfect, the knowledge of the perfect, the knowledges of the perfect, a knowledge of the perfect, the understanding of the perfect, the understandings of the perfect, a understanding of the perfect, the wisdom of the perfect, the wisdoms of the perfect, a wisdom of the perfect, the revelation of the perfect, the revelations of the perfect, a revelation of the perfect, the fortress of the perfect, the fortresses of the perfect, a fortress of the perfect, the city of the perfect, the cities of the perfect, a city of the perfect, the nation of the perfect, the nations of the perfect, a nation of the perfect, the civilization of the perfect, the civilizations of the perfect, a civilization of the perfect,